The title of these notes are The Carter Years. As you can see, Jimmy Carter was the 39th president from 1977 to 1981. Make sure to title these notes The Carter Years. Jimmy Carter is still alive today. He's our longest lasting president post his presidency. Let's begin. You only need to write down what is underlined in these notes. Jimmy Carter, the citizens' president. He had this outside persona, and he appealed to the people, but he did not appeal to Congress very well. He had a large difficulty passing bills because he didn't work well with Congress. Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer and a one-time governor, and people were looking for something different after Richard Nixon, and so people voted for Jimmy Carter. He did grant amnesty to draft dodgers, and there was mixed reaction on this. There were those who thought that this was unjust and that justice should be served on the draft dodgers, that they did not go to Vietnam as others that had been drafted did. However, Jimmy Carter, he really wanted to get past Richard Nixon and get past the Vietnam War. And it's probably a good thing that he did grant amnesty to these draft dodgers because we were able to heal from the Vietnam War and the scandals of Nixon and move on. Economic problems that he inherited during his term. An oil embargo placed by OPEC, which are mainly countries in the Middle East. Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, placed an embargo on America because they didn't like American policies, and so they stopped selling gas to America. And so that created a gas shortage where American people had to wait long lines for multiple hours just to get gasoline because it was so scarce. This reminds me of when coronavirus hit and there was a shortage of paper towels and toilet paper. People would have to wait in line just to get a limited amount. Also, there was a limited amount that you could buy. And so that was the same thing with the gasoline. And as you can see, from 1973 to 1979, within 6 years, gas prices rose by 3 times. Carter began to encourage conservation and place limits, but that wasn't the only thing that America was suffering from, but also stagflation, as we saw with Gerald R. Ford, President Ford. Stagflation is both a stagnant economy mixed with inflation. High unemployment with high inflation, that makes for a poor economy where we stop producing and people stop having income as much as they did before. As you can see right here, the oil prices over 150 years have fluctuated, and in the 1970s it was at the highest. President Carter also had a call for change. This is the Crisis of Confidence speech, his malaise speech of 1979. He asked for an end to self-indulgence and consumption. This was originally supposed to be just a pep talk, but it ended up being turned to people feeling like they were being harassed, and people felt like they were being accused. And so when Jimmy Carter spoke to the American people, he meant it to be positive, but people started to see how he was kind of condemning of them, and nobody likes to feel condemned or belittled. And so he ended up even asking for members of his cabinet to resign, and 5 of them did. And so there was a lot of challenges to Carter's presidency. People don't like to hear that they are the problem, even if they are. Then we have environmental concerns. Increased care of the environment since the 1960s. Ever since the 60s and 70s, Americans have been conscious about the environment and what we're doing to our country and to the world. But a specific example was Love Canal. This was a chemical waste site that had impacted the health of surrounding citizens. It wasn't until people started protesting that the government finally got involved. And so the government would set up what is called Superfund, which was to clean the sites with extreme pollution. As you can see right here, these are the different sites that Superfund would clean up the different pollutants. These aren't just your average littering, but these are serious pollutants such as polluting clean drinking water and other resources that need to stay healthy. This reminds me of Flint, Michigan, where people had to protest at Flint, Michigan in order for the government to step in and protect the people's clean drinking water from big business pollutants. You would also have an environmental concern with the partial meltdown of 3 Mile Island. This was a nuclear site, as you can see right here. Now, nuclear was supposed to be the clean alternative to coal that we've been using since the 1700s. But this meltdown, or partial meltdown of these reactors, added a lot of fears about nuclear power. And it wasn't until President Carter visited this site that it calmed the public fears. But Americans are constantly looking for better sources of energy because coal pollutes the air, and the nuclear power pollutes the water that's used to cool down the reactors. And so we're constantly looking for different ways. Wind and solar has been big, but those even have pollutants, whereas the technology to run those things only lasts so long. And so if those things are not properly recycled, then that creates pollutants as well. Foreign policy. Jimmy Carter, he would officially recognize China in 1979. He was not the first president to meet with the Chinese. Richard Nixon actually was the first president to visit China. But this was a big step that America was finally recognizing China and having favorable relations with China. This was important to China because China for around 600 years had been isolated from the rest of the world and just focusing on their own economy within themselves. And so this really would, this step would bring them to the global market. Jimmy Carter was also big on human rights around the world and still is. Cold War tensions. Détente, if you remember, détente is the cooling of tension. It's the easing of tensions. And détente would really work ever since Richard Nixon. There would be less tension between America and Russia. However, in 1979, that would change. The SALT Treaty, SALT II, Strategic Arm Limitation Talks, would be signed between the Soviet Union and America, as you can see in that photo in the middle, bottom. However, it was never ratified by the Senate. So that treaty was not ratified because there were Americans that thought that we could not police this treaty, that we could not ensure that Russia was going to uphold their end of the bargain of limiting nuclear and ballistic missiles. Russia would then invade Afghanistan the same year to prop up a pro-Soviet government. If you remember, Russia has never had a warm water port. They don't have good harbors, and so having Afghanistan in the south would have allowed them to have access to the Indian Ocean and to a lot of trade. However, America did not like this, so we suspended grain sales to the USSR. America supplies a lot of grain, bread, if you will. We're known as the breadbasket of the world, believe it or not. A lot of farming in America. We also boycotted the 1980 Olympics. A lot of different countries would not go to Russia for the Olympics, who was hosting the Olympics that year, out of protest of their invasion of Afghanistan. For the USS War, this invasion of Afghanistan was kind of their Vietnam War, so to speak, and they would withdraw 10 years later in total defeat. Much like the Vietnam War, America had larger forces and more trained troops. But we could not win in Vietnam because we did not have the hearts of the people. Same thing with Russia. They did not have the hearts of the Afghan people, though they had superior technology. This reminds me also of Great Britain, who had greater technology and resources during the American Revolution, but it was the American patriots, the guerrilla forces, if you will, the freedom fighters, as Britain would see them as terrorists. Our patriots won, not because of superior weapons, but because of determination. The Russians, though, would have a difficulty fighting the Mujahideen, the guerrilla Afghan forces. And so America actually supplied the Mujahideen, this terrorist group, also like Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. We would support them with weapons, with grenades, with roadside bombs, with machine guns, AK-47s, and different ballistics, because we believed our enemy's enemy is our friend. But the problem is that once the terrorists were done fighting the Soviets, they would then turn on America in the late 90s and finally attack America on September 11th, 2001. And when our American forces go over to Afghanistan to liberate their people and to hunt down these terrorists, they would use the same technology and the same weapons that we had given them back in 1979. They would use those against U.S. troops. Carter would have some successes, though, on foreign policy. The Camp David Accords was a success. This was the agreement between Egypt and Israel. This was a big accomplishment for Carter. He had both of them meet at his retreat house called the Camp David. And this is where Egypt would recognize Israel for the very first time. Any Arab country has recognized Israel as a country. And so this was a very big step forward. Carter was a Christian, and so he believed that this was even bigger than others saw it because of the Jews being in captivity of the Egyptians thousands of years ago. And so really this sent a big message for peace in the Middle East. However, not all were in agreement with this peace agreement, and many Arab countries in the Middle East did not like what had happened, specifically in Iran. The Iran hostage crisis. Iranians took over the U.S. embassy after we had offered the Shah of Iran asylum in the U.S. There was really two reasons that the Iranians had taken over our U.S. embassy. The first reason is because of the Camp David Accords. They really did not like Jimmy Carter and his peace between Israel and Egypt. But also, the Shah of Iran was very unpopular, the leader of the Iranian government there. And so when the Shah had gotten cancer, the people in Iran were excited that their leader was going to die. But when America offers him asylum and cancer treatment, the Iranians get very angry over that. And so this hostage taking of 52 hostages, American hostages, lasted 444 days until Reagan's inauguration. And the reason for that was because they did not like Carter and they wanted to release them during a different president. Thankfully, no U.S. casualties, nobody was seriously hurt, but this was seen as a major failure for Carter. Even though he sent in the Delta Force to try to release these hostages, it was unsuccessful, and this would go down as one of the saddest things during his presidency. So that is it for our notes. As you can see here, Jimmy Carter is a man with a big heart and one of our hardest working presidents, but with that big heart comes some naivety, being naive. And so he was somebody who trusted dictators and trusted terrorists and such more than he should have, because he was trying to get cooperation and such. Make sure to submit these notes. Thank you.